Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suchi and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Now on Hawaii News Now. We have a lot of questions, and we're going to get to the governor in just a few moments. But one of the unique things about our show is the conversation that you can have with our guests. We want to encourage those of you who may have a question for the governor about our first topic regarding measles or any of the topics we cover. You can head over to Facebook and type your questions into the comments section.
And we want to lead off by welcoming the governor. Now, thank you so much for being here. Just left a press conference at the Capitol, and now here with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you. For those folks who did not see the news conference, give us the basics. We understand there is a measles case in a young child here in Hawaii.
Yes, there is one case. It is not an outbreak, and we're going to be very careful about that. What I can share is the child's under age 5. The child's family was traveling internationally. This particular child wasn't vaccinated, though I believe that the family supports vaccinations. Interestingly, it's just this particular child hadn't yet had a vaccination. Kids can get the MMR vaccination at age 1, and then usually the booster is between age 4 and 6. So this child's doing okay, but 1 in 5 people will end up being hospitalized when they get the measles. This occurred when they got back. The child became symptomatic a couple days later, and right now our Department of Health is doing the good public health works that they do, which is they're contact tracing and contacting anybody who might have come into contact with the child or the family.
And so this kind of sounds similar to conversations we had during COVID when you're talking about contact tracing and different people who may have had engagement with this family or this child. What is some of the things that you would like the public to know about this? Should they be alarmed by this? What are the measures that you are basically suggesting for the general public to be aware of as we navigate through this time?
So a lot there. The first thing I should say is humbly, please get vaccinated. Please be vaccinated against measles, which is the MMR shot, because measles is super contagious and it's not nothing. I mean, 1 out of 1,000 people will die when they get the measles. We saw that in Samoa in 2019. There were 83 deaths and over 5,000 cases. So please get vaccinated. A lot to share. We know some people have chosen religious exemptions to not get vaccinated for themselves or their kids. I just signed an emergency rule this morning, and let me be really clear to people. If you want to get vaccinated for MMR, for measles, it will not, I repeat, will not invalidate, based on this emergency rule I signed, your religious exemption. So if you choose to get it, this vaccination is very safe, but there are reasons to avoid this disease. What else can I share with you? Yeah, we learned to contact trace very well. And so we have some of our superstars, Dr. Campbell, Dr. Fink, involved in this right now, and Dr. Tensala, who's our pediatrician and dear friend, Nadine, all advising us. So what will happen now is we'll make sure that that whole family's okay. They, of course, are locked down at home. They're quarantined. Here's the way it goes with the measles. If you are not vaccinated and you're around somebody with the measles, you're going to catch it 90% of the time. It's that contagious. If you're in a room where someone was with the measles and they had droplets coming out of their nose or runny eyes or coughing, it will stay there for 2 hours. So again, you're very likely to catch it. Now, for the most part, Hawaii has had pretty good protection. We are at 89.8% vaccinated for our kids that are in school. However, a lot of homeschool kids, not as much. They're not as vaccinated. And there are pockets of our state where the vaccine rate in some schools is like 42%, 65%. I went over some of that data in the press conference. You can see it on the Department of Health website. So if you were to get an outbreak in an area where there's a lower rate of vaccination, it's going to spread like crazy. You really normally need to be at 95% in society to be guaranteed. Our nation's at 93%, and you see there's over 600 cases, and there have been these 2 fatalities. Our state, again at 89.8%, will see outbreaks if we get unlucky. And where I was the doctor in Ka'u, there was some vaccine hesitancy in a percentage of the population. So if you're in that community, and for example, if say only 70% of the people are immune and vaccinated, that 30% of the people will catch it if it spreads in a school or in a classroom or even at a beach party. So please consider getting vaccinated. And just if you have any concerns at all, call your health provider because they'll give you good advice.
You know, given you said that this child was relatively recently diagnosed, but was on an international flight before then, I cannot think of a worse place for a person to be infectious than at the airport, an international airport at that. Do you think that this child was contagious at the airport, and how do you do contact tracing for something like that?
It's very possible, and let me just tell you the specifics. So if anyone was at Daniel K. Inouye Airport in Gate C area or the customs or baggage on March 30th, between 10:50 a.m. and 2 p.m. I'll repeat that, and people can put it up. It's Daniel K. Inouye Airport at the C gates or custom and baggage claim, but on March 30th between 10:50 a.m. and 2 p.m. We would like them to be careful and call their provider, or they might have been in contact. Also, there were 2 terminal departures, TSA checkpoints and gate areas for Delta Flight 309 in Atlanta to Atlanta, Georgia, where we're a little bit worried for people. Again, hopefully the child was not too infectious. I'll explain that in a second. And then finally, at Manoa Valley District Park, there was an art class on April 1st between 9 and 10 a.m. Manoa Valley District Park art class. And then Queens Island Urgent Care in Kapahulu on April 4th between 8 a.m. to noon. Any of those times or places, it's possible. Now, here's the way it works with the measles. Okay, so someone in this other country had the measles that this child came into contact with. The incubation period of the virus is between 7 days and about 2 weeks. So you could catch it and it's starting to brew in you, but you don't have any symptoms. You don't have the fever, you don't have the runny nose, you don't have the bad rash. About 4 days before you start getting symptomatic, you have enough virus in you to spread it to someone. Then the whole time that you've got the rash and you got these symptoms, you're contagious. And then usually for about 4 days after, you would be, quote unquote, shedding the virus. And so it's a pretty solid period of time. It could be like 2 weeks that if your family member has measles, that they might have been exposing others to it. And if they walked through a group of people in, say, a school or whatever, where, say, 30 out of 100 kids were not vaccinated and they were there, those 30 are going to catch the measles, and then they're just going to go. That's why we're very serious about this. And imagine for a second what we saw in Samoa. Imagine if that population of 200,000 people ended up getting approximated on the Big Island. Not trying to scare anybody, it's not on the Big Island. We have about 250,000 people on the Big Island. If measles spread a lot and you had, say, 5,000 cases like we had in Samoa that one time, you would have 1,000 hospitalizations. Can you imagine having to hospitalize an additional 1,000 people on the Big Island or send them over to Kapiolani or to Queens or HPH? So it's not something that we can take lightly. And then, of course, we would have a handful of tragedies and fatalities, and 1 in 20 people get a pneumonia, 1 in 1,000 people get encephalopathy. That's where their brain swells and they get disabilities. So it's a very serious thing, and I don't want to make light of it ever. You know, I want the country to be vaccinated, and I want them to be very careful, because back as recently as 2000, we didn't have any cases. Basically, it was eradicated, and then the misinformation and so on has spread, and we're seeing now different parts of the country see these cases. Right now, we're over 600 cases on the mainland, and that's in 22 areas, 22 states or municipalities. That's going to double and double and double. It gets big real fast if we don't get this under control, which was why I humbly asked the Department of Health and Human Services to, 1, restore all of the health positions that work on these things to prevent spread. You know, we need our Department of Health to be fully funded, and 2, to go on a national campaign to vaccinate people while still minding their civil rights. But be thoughtful, at least in this moment, if it's important, to not just protect yourself and your family, but your neighbors, because they will catch it.
I want to talk about a community that is at risk, and that's maybe newborns. And because newborns will have to wait a year before they're able to get their first dosage of this, what would you recommend to those parents out there who, you know, might have a newborn in their family that they're looking after, and just being worried about where they should take him? Where should they maybe avoid traveling during this time, knowing that this is out there?
Well, right now, because it's not yet a pandemic, there's no new advice. The Department of Health will weigh in with significant parameters on where it's safe and where it's not if we start seeing a bunch of cases. So we don't have to change our travel patterns or anything like that just yet. But yes, a child, and this is one of the reasons I'm very adamant about people considering at least what will happen to their neighbors. A family, even if they support vaccinations, can't help their pre-1-year-old. On some rare occasions, people will get vaccinated as early as 6 months if you've consulted your pediatrician. But yeah, kids are vulnerable. Right now, it's not a concern. They don't have to change their behaviors at all. I will just say that keep in touch with us. Keep listening for updates, because we will tell you if there's any extra exposures or any outbreaks in a school or in some part of our state. So far, we're okay, but we right now are tracking all of these sites where the child was, and it's been about that period of time. Today is the 8th of the month, so it's been essentially like a week or so, or 9 days. This is when you would start picking up some other cases. And again, it doesn't take very much to spread the measles if a person doesn't have immune protection.
Okay, and so let's say there are people who think that they may have been exposed. You contact your primary care provider if you have one. Are there symptoms that you need to be looking out for? What should they be doing if they think they might have come into contact with this person?
Yes, they first they should call the Department of Health number, and we'll get that up on the screen, and it's in the press releases and what have you. But yes, they should contact their provider. There's a couple ways to do it. First of all, if you're worried, and usually it's like super high fever, fever of 104 degrees Fahrenheit, is burning up, okay? If you have runny nose, runny eyes, red eyes, and then if you get that crazy red kind of rough-looking rash, and you can look it up on the internet and see what it looks like. I saw a lot of cases, of course, in Samoa. So, and only very rarely have we had cases in Hawaii or in the U.S. So, yes, check all those boxes, because if you have any suspicions that you have this concern, call your provider. They may not want you to come right into the clinic. They might FaceTime you. They might get a swab over to you just to check, because we can do what's called a nasopharyngeal swab. We all remember that from COVID, where the nose gets rubbed, and find out whether someone has actually the viral particles. It's called a PCR test. But really, there's going to be other people with colds, regular colds. I don't want people to panic. I don't even want them to be overly concerned, because that will still be happening. We're emerging from the flu season right now. We're emerging from the cold season right now. But we will tell you if we have any extra positive cases, and we will also be very, very direct about where those hotspots could be.
You had mentioned that there are now 22 states that now are facing this. You have been very vocal about this administration and about the leader that is in charge with this, in Robert Kennedy Jr. Your thoughts about how the administration so far is handling this? Have you had conversations at the national level about this case, about what's happened nationally, and overall, what has been your response to the way that they've responded to this outbreak that we're seeing in 22 states?
Yeah, so this case only happened this morning, and so we've been spending the morning preparing to share this information with everybody. I have asked the administration, like I said, to pull back on the cuts for direct public health services, like public health nurses and docs and epidemiologists, and I've also asked that they do a national campaign. I don't know that they're going to honor that request or the request that they're hearing from all the different public health professionals across the country. Everyone wants that same thing. But I do have a very good rapport. I've actually been talking to the administration in the past couple days about the tariffs. We may get there today. I'm also very concerned about that. I've been concerned about the long-term economic impacts, because if you have the tariffs crushing our retirement and crushing our economies and crushing travel, then I don't, as governor, have the same kind of resources to pay for the Department of Health or Department of Education. So that's what I've been talking to them about. They've been very responsive. They hear me. They hear a lot of people. I think they're hearing it from the more conservative folks in the country also. If what I read is at all accurate in many news outlets, everyone's kind of worried about this. They haven't replied to me yet from a public health standpoint, and I'm more than happy to share with Mr. Kennedy and others what we have to do.
Okay, I want to get to tariffs in a moment. One last question, and we can move on from the measles, and that is, if you're not vaccinated or you think that you need an update, how quickly are you protected against the virus? If you were to go out and get a vaccine for the first time today, does that necessarily help?
It does. If you've been recently exposed, you have 72 hours to go get a shot. and it will very likely protect you. It's called a booster. You get the shot. There's also another thing. If you're very high risk, you've been exposed to, say, at a first birthday or something along those lines, and it's pretty clear that you were exposed, but you had no immunity, you can get immunoglobulin, which is like the antibodies directly, which we've done with other diseases, and that's within 6 days. So if this becomes a thing where we have spread, there definitely are options for people. And again, if you were born before like 1957, you're immune. Don't worry about it. You, believe me, had the measles or you got antibodies. If you're in that window, I believe between 57 and 68 or so, it's not as clear. You might benefit from at least talking to your provider, and a booster is not going to hurt you. It's not going to do anything to you if you're in that category. And then everyone else, if they got their school shots, they're immune too. But if you are worried, let's say you're just a very worried person and you've been exposed, call your pediatrician or your doctor up. They'll give you a shot. And we can also do it at some of the pharmacies.
Let's move on to another hot topic, as you were alluding to and talking about, and that's the tariffs that we are seeing and being proposed by this administration. We have seen the reaction on the stock market. Many people, all eyes glued to what's happening there, and a lot of concern within the communities, not only here locally, of course, but nationally. But looking at some of these local businesses that might be impacted by these tariffs that are going to raise the cost of goods and services overall, with the cost of living already being so high, what do you think the state can do to help provide support for maybe some of these businesses who are going to say, hey, we can't afford this, and it's just driving up the price of the cost of living for the state in the state?
Again, a very good question. So the tariffs right now are really putting us in a precarious position. It's not good at all, in my opinion. I know that there are some out there who say we're trying to right fit trade, but doing them like this, which, with a sledgehammer or a chainsaw, is wreaking havoc. First of all, I'm worried about people's retirements. You know, people who are already 65 and older who have to rely on their retirement dollars, they may not have time to recover. Let me say this. We're going to be okay overall, I believe, because you can see the markets, even when there's an inkling that the president's going to settle with, Japan or Europe, the market quickly spikes. And so everyone be calm. It's going to be okay. I think some of this is going to get sorted. Now, for small businesses, the short-term harm could be profound. And if we see a big surge in costs along the supply chain, we are in trouble. I think some small businesses are going to go out of business. I can't, in state law, just suddenly do like tax credits or anything. It's very difficult to respond to what's an executive order and changing market forces in just minutes. So what I'm doing, is advocating for the president to, within 7 to 10 days, allow a window right now for 7 to 10 days of negotiation so that people can settle down with the markets and we can settle some of these discrepancies. I think other nations are prepared to right fit their trade relationship with us, and that should bring much of this resource back. But this quarter, this economic quarter, which is just beginning, we're in the beginning of the second quarter, means that a lot of the revenues are going to be lower. Travel could be curtailed to our state if people just don't have the savings, and we could see a big problem. Plus, the Canadians are really angry because, the president talked about annexing them, and not just for their hockey teams. I'm talking about like taking their country. And so I've had many letters from Canadian communities saying they're not coming. 5% of our travelers come from Canada, and 22% decreases are already projected in travel from Canada to Hawaii. So that's 1% of all of our travelers right gone. Needless to say, the Chinese community is not going to be traveling here given where we are now with tariffs. And I think a lot of the world is rattled. Like I said earlier, I think can get us through probably 2 years with some resources. We're going to set aside about $200 million, the legislature is. They're being very thoughtful about this, to fortify some of our expenditures if we get cuts. But if there was a deep cut after these tariffs, also to, say, Medicaid, and if we saw a recession or a downturn in travel here, we could be facing extremely tough times. So we need the cloud to lift. This is really not very helpful, and I think the point's been made. The president's made the point that he can pound on people, and maybe now we should nurture some of these relationships because regular people are hurting.
You mentioned tourism. What specific sectors of the economy are you most concerned about when it comes to the tariffs? I know that, for instance, building costs are so high in Hawaii, and we're talking about steel and all these raw materials. But what sectors are you the most concerned about when you look at this economic landscape?
Well, housing is the most important thing that we have going. So thank you for that question. If we see material spikes or breaks in the supply chain, that's what we saw during COVID and post-COVID. Everything got more expensive, 30, 50%. So people who are already planning developments, then all of a sudden they come back to me and say, I know it's not convenient, but it's going to be 15% more expensive to do your housing project. And I worry about that because that will be translated to the price of the house later. So that's a big concern. Lumber and steel from places like Canada, Japan, it's a big deal for us. So that's one thing. Then I worry just about the sheer economic downturn and revenues not coming here because we depend so much on tourism. Interestingly, in the current state of affairs, because the Indo-Pacific is so important, we've been able to make the compelling case not to have any military cuts as far as manpower or building and so on in the Indo-Pacific region. So we're not facing the 8% cut that they are across the board for defense spending. We're going to be okay there. But that's not very reassuring to the small business owner or the home builder. So it's very disruptive, and I would prefer us not to be engaged in this kind of self-harm, which is what it's becoming. We were just finding our kind of footing on getting young people to come back. Housing prices have stabilized. We're doing a lot of building. And I'd hate to see the costs go up. I'd hate to see Kauhale costs go up for our homeless solutions. All of this stuff is important. Medications get, in some cases, made overseas. It's expensive already. So there's innumerable challenges right now. And I would like to see this tariff situation get resolved really fast because I will tell you, there's no reason for a recession right now. The economy could boom based on where we are. We've had decent growth. We avoided the big recession after COVID, which is amazing, though things have been rough for some. This would be totally self-inflicted.
I want to ask about an area that will, really rely on some of these goods, and that's the community of Lahaina as they begin this rebuilding effort with costs what it is right now and trying to factor in what things could be like potentially 2 to 3 years down the line. Maybe some of the settlements are at a set amount now, but if we continue to see these rising costs, some of these people who are trying to rebuild their homes may have to be paying more than they expected because of these tariffs. How do you foresee all of this impacting Lahaina specifically as this rebuilding effort continues?
Yeah, I've thought about that. I thought about that actually in the context also of the Los Angeles wildfire. So both of these forces are significant. I mean, they have a lot of gravity to them. So Los Angeles had a fire that's like 8 to 10 times bigger than ours, and they have to now do debris cleanup. They have to build new housing. They have to do all of the infrastructure, and that draws a lot of national resources there. Over $50 billion, I'm told, at least by my friend Governor Newsom, who is a pal, and we talk about these things. So that's one force, and now the tariffs, if they raise prices, say 20%, could be troubling. So we settled the lawsuits at $4 billion and $37 million. That money's going to go all to the people that lost their homes or, God forbid, lost a loved one or were injured. But yes, if they were planning on getting a check of $500,000 or $600,000 or $700,000 and now things are 20% more, their house will be smaller. They will have more difficulty getting the materials. So there's that piece, and there's also the settlement that we have with FEMA, and that's $1.6 billion. So we were already anticipating over $5.5 billion coming into Hawaii specifically for those who went through so much, and I can't go and renegotiate the whole deal. I mean, we came up with what could be had, to prevent us from going bankrupt, or the county, or HECO, or anybody. Try to keep everyone together and solid. So it comes at a terrible time. It's again why I'm very, very concerned about this additional variable. The additional variable of tariffs and higher costs and a potential economic downturn would be a terrible time to deal with this. Having said all that, there are a couple caveats. If there is a change in the strength and power of the dollar against the yen, we could see, interestingly, some Japanese travelers be more able to come here. They are now increasing their travel back to Hawaii, up 28% year over year. So that's some news that I got the other day. And also, there is an argument to be made that when tourism is down, that's when you want to do repairs, maintenance, and build. So those will be jobs that we will, be pushing people into. So there are some balances to be considered, but overall, it's just more expensive, and it's already too expensive in Hawaii.
So there's the tariffs, and then there's also federal policy. We're seeing cuts, of course, happening across the board. We've seen federal workers getting laid off. I want to ask you specifically, though, about the Department of Education, because I know that's something that you've been paying close attention to.
Yes.
The president has made clear that it is his intention to eventually dismantle the Department of Education. We don't know if that is possible legally and how long that could take, but how is the state preparing for that? And if they were to actually, what they're saying is just write a check, give you the funds, can the state actually manage those functions, especially for, populations that are vulnerable, like kids with special needs?
Yes, brilliant question. So here's the challenge. I did a Zoom call, just me and the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, the other day, maybe 4 or 5 days ago, and I expressed these concerns. They say they're going to send us the money. Can we as a state absorb the money and do the work? Yes. We're unique. I'm not saying we should get rid of the Department of Education. I think there's some definite value in having a national education policy and, of course, managing people's grants to university and all these programs. We already, though, are fairly independent. We're unique in that we only have one school district. We already are fairly independent, and I feel confident that we would be able to look at those children, for instance, who have special needs. It's about 10-11% of our students, and be able to keep in place the special ed teachers, be able to keep in place the subsidies for their nursing and all those professionals. We would be getting rid of the bureaucracy, which to some viewers and most people, if we can get rid of some cost and waste, is valued. But there are reasons to have experts in these areas. There's a lot of wisdom at the Department of Education. If some of those people get dismissed, as you know, I will try to actually hire some of them if they are connected to Hawaii, because this Operation Hire Hawaii has been, I think, one of the semi-bright lights in this moment where we're willing to hire people. We've had over 3,000 applications for employees, and we'll hire some of them for sure. But you can't just dismantle all the federal government, because what happens is you get rid of one part and you realize, oh my God, those people were checking on lead poisoning. You dismantle another part and it was the people that connected you to the teachers that did the special ed curriculum. And so if you do it piecemeal and you get rid of these things, you end up in trouble. You saw that they cut some services, and I'm very much against DOGE, by the way. I'm very upset that we've allowed Elon Musk to muck around in any government, including President Trump's government. I think it's really bad. So you dismantle certain pieces and then the other pieces don't function. And that, I think, is part of his MO. He wants to get rid of the federal government.
He, as in Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. And that is unhealthy for a lot of reasons, because systems analysts will tell you you can't just take an axe and bam, knock one big piece of something out and not expect it to affect all the others around them. So we're going to keep talking to them. There's also questions of FEMA. There's a lot of issues, but I'll tell you, if you break it, you own it at a certain level. And I think that's what you're seeing with the protests. Again, I'm trying very hard not to be partisan. I'm trying to work with, I was on the phone the other day with some of the cabinet. I'm sharing with them that we want successes for the country, and we certainly want successes for Hawaii. But some of this stuff is just too much. And I think what's going to happen is I think Mr. Musk is going to leave after 130 days, which is good. That's the rules on his position. He should go back to making crazy-looking cars. And then I think the rest of the cabinet will settle down a little bit, because I would share it with you that they feel that this is disruptive for them. They can't even do their jobs in their own departments because pieces of their infrastructure is being removed. And it's not fair. I've seen this happen. Even as a governor, I know it's unfair to have other people mucking around in your department's business. You got to be respectful of them, and that's not been the case.
Okay, a lot of comments coming in, and we're going to get to those in just a moment. But first, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Stay with us. You're watching Spotlight Now.
And welcome back to Spotlight Now. We continue on in our conversation with Governor Josh Green. Governor, we want to transition over to what's happening in the legislature. I want to start off with we know that you're closely following what's happening, of course, with budget discussions, conversations as the budget evolves, based on a number of different reports. There is a proposal to dissolve some of the vacant positions that have been vacant for some time in order to save money for the state. Your overall thoughts with the way you think the budget is being crafted right now at the state in the legislative process?
I think they're being very thoughtful. That was a part of a shared plan, a joint plan. I asked them to consider dissolving some positions that were vacant for more than 4 years and, could save hundreds of millions of dollars if done well. So I'm totally on board with that. That's the legislator in me was always in agreement with where the Ways and Means chair and the finance chair are, which is if we just haven't filled those positions, it's okay. We always want some wiggle room, and right now we are hiring some people, of course, because of the cuts at the federal level, but that's fine. The priorities need to be in there, and you can see they've been passing them pretty soundly. The largest appropriation, single appropriation, is the settlement. That's $800 million spread out over 3.5 years. It prevented upwards of $2 billion of cost for us in litigations. That's why that was important. Also, we set that money aside. There are negotiations and payment, of course, for raises for public workers. It's between like 3.5% and 4%, basically pretty fair, and I think people have been in general accepting of that. As a point of just solidarity, I'm not going to take the pay raise, as you know, that was passed. I'm going to give that to charity. Jamie and I described that as an important thing, although it's just one person, or me and the lieutenant governor, 2 people. But you get the idea. The legislators aren't getting pay increases, by the way, until after this 2-year cycle, so that's not in the budget. That goes out, to be fair to them. But yes, they're doing a good job. There are some priorities. I'm making a strong point that we have to continue on this mission to get homeless people off the streets so we don't see the extra cost in the hospital. I'm making a point that we need to see appropriations for like nurses and social workers and doctors that provide care in the public health setting, especially so that they don't have to travel, so we don't lose care for people. We have to rebuild the school over in Maui that burned down. That'll come out of insurance monies. We got $200 million from insurance. So there's a lot of good things that are happening. And then there's that large question about the climate impact fees or the climate tax, call it what you want, the green fee. That is still alive, both House and Senate, if I may jump the question. And right now would be a 1% tax on the travelers at the hotel level, the TAT tax. I am against, raising taxes on our people because they're going through a lot. We actually lowered taxes. I'm really appreciative of what the legislature did to lower working people's taxes last year. That $5.6 billion tax break is now coming home. People are paying their taxes next week. They should pay a lot less of state tax. But this tax, to pay for climate mitigation, to pay for prevention of fires spreading, to make sure that we deal with sea level rise, we need that. We actually need a lot more, but this is a very good start, and it will be absorbed, I'm confident, comfortably by the hospitality industry, and they're doing their part. I'm appreciative of them. So if they're listening, they should know I appreciate them.
Is there a sunset on this increase, or is this in perpetuity? And how do you make sure? I know you said that money is earmarked. How do you make sure? Because I think there will be hesitation from the visitor industry side to say, oh, this just goes in the general fund and we never see it again.
No, we're asking the legislature to be very specific about where they want the money spent. I can tell you as an administration, we'll spend it on climate change directly. I probably need closer to $500 million to do all the things that climate change is doing to our state. But at around $100 million, which is what it looks like now, between the 1% and maybe some fees on cruise ships that come in, we're working that out. We want to be fair. That money will definitely go towards mitigating the impacts of global warming. We need so much more. I don't even know where to start half the time, but we've, for a long time, underfunded Department of Land and Natural Resource programs. This will go there, and it really helps. But it's important, so everyone knows, it's not a tax on our local people. It's a visitor 1% tax. There would not be a sunset, is my understanding right now, unless something has changed in the bill. And it's a good time to get ahead of this. By the way, we've done these kind of things before. We earmarked, I know this is a controversial issue, we earmarked some tax for the rail, and it did sunset because the rail will finally be finished at some point, hopefully in our lifetime, right? But the question of climate change is going to go on for a long time. Again, I want local people to pay less tax, and I would like travelers to pay their share of impact because there's 10 million visitors, there's only 1.4 million of us, and the impact is significant.
Let's stand here on just where we're at with the tourism industry and also who's leading our tourism industry. During this time, there is a lot happening and shifts that are happening within the Hawaii Tourism Authority. There are some who are saying now that during this legislative process, as conversations are being had about how much HTA should receive, if this is an organization that still needs to be intact. Given everything that's happening, what do you think the future of HTA looks like? And do you support having this as a standalone agency or any sort of revision to the overall structure of the agency moving forward?
Yeah, for now, I think it's been working very hard these last couple years. Let me say several things about this. They had some turnover, no doubt. I so appreciate the work that they've been doing to kind of fit us to where we had lost our way 2 years ago. 2 years ago when we came in, they didn't have contracts on tourism management or promotion. It was kind of all stuck together. There was conflict. That got deconflicted. Someone who I work very well with and I'm very fond of, Mufi, came in for a couple years and chaired and he put some force behind some of the things that were happening, and that helped. I know there was a brush up recently, and Mufi didn't want to be a distraction. They resolved that issue. That issue was a kind of a misunderstanding, and that was a thing that was highlighted in the newspapers, that there was a question about some breakfasts or something, but it was a misunderstanding, and his organizations have taken care of those costs. We've moved past that. Everyone wants to move forward. But I also want to celebrate my DBED director, Jimmy Tokioka, who was one of our superstars during the Maui wildfire and has been there as the actual chair of the department, the head of the department, steering these things through. We still need input and guidance on how tourism should go. We have to market ourselves well. Ultimately, it'll be interesting to see where this settles in. Tata Poe is the incoming chair, and he is a great guy. He has had lots of experience. He was a council member, and Mufi is still on the board. All of them need to come together and just work together because we're going to go through rough times, very likely, with what's going on in the mainland and with the circumstance from the federal government. So I needed them to all settle down. So that's why I humbly asked them to resolve this question. They did, about use of the convention center. That's behind us. From my perspective, everyone is working together, and now we go forward and we try to encourage the world that it's a good place to travel to, and it's a wonderfully safe place to travel to. It is not necessarily what we see on the mainland out of Washington, D.C. We are a much more peaceful place.
So there's the issue with the board, and you just did mention that Mufi has stepped aside and Tata Poe is taking the chairmanship there. There's also the issue of leadership at the top there with there's now the interim CEO left, and there is now an interim to the interim, basically.
Yes.
A lot of the question centers around the compensation, and you had sort of sided with the faction that had said cap it at the lieutenant governor's salary. Do you still think that is enough money to draw the kind of talent that is needed to run that kind of an agency?
Yeah, I do. I think you'll end up paying someone probably about $210,000 a year. There are also a lot of benefits that come with that position. And, I think probably what we need to do is we need to find kind of a young, hungry go-getter that will do the job, who has, the ability to communicate well, that has traveled, that knows sports, that knows other aspects of tourism, that, someone that could put a nice, bright face on the department. And frankly, I could imagine a couple good people.
One of the things that also is worth discussing when it comes to this is the state of the convention center.
Yes.
With repairs that need to be made and the potential loss of some of these big contracts, as we look to market the state and attract some of these larger groups and organizations that utilize this, how can we as a state deal with that? Because we're talking about some of these penalties that the state's going to have to pay out in contracts, but also just the loss of beds that hotels were reserving for these types of conventions. How confident are you in the timeline presented for the repairs, and also just moving forward, how the state continues to attract these types of tour groups without a facility in use?
That's an important point. We did get word recently that it's going to take a little longer for them to do the full repair and maintenance of the convention center because they found more decay and breakdown. I was angry when I heard that. It's not the fault of anyone at all at the convention center. It's just we only got 2 bidders. Right now, this is a good example of what happened with COVID, where there are just fewer people in the business, in all sorts of businesses, to come and do jobs. There was a lot more delay in repairs. People delayed getting their health care. They delayed repairing buildings because the whole world kind of quieted down, in some cases shut down, and we're now paying for that. So we're navigating it. It means that probably we'll lose at least one major client. We're trying to do kind of a swap, and so if we can, we're going to try to get a different market to take, I guess it was 2027, and we would take them in 2028, so we recoup that money. And it stings occasionally when these kind of things happen, but we haven't really lacked a base of travelers. We've recovered for the most part. These are the kind of things that happen, and they're more than just cyclical. They are also definitely being affected by what happened with the larger global shutdown during the pandemic. A lot of the chickens are coming home to roost, so to speak, and I get it. I'm very careful to not cast blame on anybody after everything that everyone's gone through, because I'm just grateful people even stayed in their jobs and are still committed to Hawaii. But we just need more. Like we need more builders. Like I see Stanford all the time. Stanford Car, he is incredible. We did another building just yesterday, I think. I need another 10 Stanford cars. And there are a few people out there that are just wonderful, Mo and other people. But we need so many more people to build, and that's helping us with the economic development side apart from tourism. I need those military contracts to keep coming, which, just so everyone knows, why I do definitely keep my calm when I'm talking to people in the federal government, because I am dismayed like you guys when I see some of these things. When I wake up at 3 in the morning and the stock market's crashing, or when people fired a bunch of others, or when they don't honor the 442nd. But I don't want anyone taking a shot at us. And I think people value Hawaii. My governor colleagues do, I can tell you that. And the relationships I have right now with the federal government seem to be relatively positive. One exception probably with the RFK. And look, we're all in this together at the end. They need us. They need us in the Pacific. We need the world. So we'll fix the convention center. We will try to spread some of the bookings out to a large array of hotels which have had some vacancies. We are reaching out to the entire hotel community, which it makes an even trickier dance as I'm asking that 1% tax to go up. But it's all a part of us working together, because that's how we keep the environment intact so people can actually visit here.
I want to ask you about something that's been moving through the legislature, that is this idea of legalizing online sports betting. What are your thoughts on that? There are some folks who say that it will be a boon to our economy, others who say that it's a vice and it could bring in a lot of bad elements, even if it is just restricted to online sports betting in Hawaii.
Yeah, so right now I'm neutral on that, although I believe it will become law if they pass it. If the majority of the senators and reps go out on a limb and do something that is novel and will bring extra monies, I wouldn't undercut them. So it would become law. A couple things. First of all, people are already doing sports betting. Okay, I mean, they're getting around the rules, and then none of the revenue's coming to us. And so I know a lot of guys who are just gambling anyway. So I'd rather revenues come to us, for one thing, and using those resources properly for housing has been supported. I did do some surveys and polls, and it showed about 2/3 of our state supported it, and it goes way up if we use the revenues or whatever profits we have to do like Hawaiian Homelands housing or supportive housing or workforce housing. So that's my intention. It'll give me an avenue to really fund for a long time our housing crisis. Let me extend even the possibility. We also ask people, do you want a casino? Some people really don't. They are more conservative. Some people really do. And then most people say only if that money goes to solve our biggest problems. Lower my taxes. Give me housing that I can afford. And that's what we would do. If we ever have that, and that conversation hasn't matured yet, but we're going to study it in the next year, I'll make sure that the money goes directly to housing, which is what our people need the most. And that would create jobs. It's change. Change is not easy. We changed a lot because we had to when COVID hit. We changed a lot when the Maui wildfire, took out 10% of our state, essentially, in a region of our economy, and we're rebuilding. And the world keeps going. If we have a circumstance where we allow more gambling, we're going to need more, probably, healthcare for people, and we're going to need help with addiction. But I'll tell you this, if it's controlled, a lot of the parts of the country say it's been good for them, especially if they can put those dollars towards education or housing. So, look, I welcome people's input. That's what it will be for the next year. It would be very limited, I will tell you that, too. If there was ever a discussion about casinos, I think they would be structured so they're only in entertainment districts and only went to our essential needs, the monies. And it probably would be something like one per county. So it would be contained. But I'm not saying what's right or wrong. I'm saying we should talk about it.
When we spoke to your DBED director, Jimmy Tokioka, a few weeks ago, he gave us an update on what was happening at Aloha Stadium. One of the updates that he provided was that the NCAA had granted the University of Hawaii a little bit more time to get things in order, which he said will help just with the overall plans for Aloha Stadium and not putting the pressure on the university to get into the stadium and really take this thorough process of building a good stadium. Last time we spoke, you said that you were courting and talking to potential people outside that could help supplement what the state is putting towards this project. What can you tell us about any of those conversations, the pitch that you're making to maybe people to be a part of this, and where things stand in the timeline of where we're at with Aloha Stadium?
Yeah, it's good for people to understand how we're approaching this. So, first of all, we need to get going. It's good that the NCAA is giving us a little breathing room. Again, society needs to move forward. A lot of discussions were had. The community was consulted and said, yes, go forward. So the entertainment district will happen. What I would like to see is us starting to demolish the Aloha Stadium this year. So we use the resources. We have $400 million essentially to, in small part, some of that money, but a small part of it, to destroy demolition the old stadium and then begin the footprint, which I refer to as phase one. Let's build those first 22,000 seats or so as phase one and finalize the additional financing as we go into phase two so we don't have to even pause. I have reached out to the major players in our economy. You can imagine who they might be. We're talking about some of them are billionaires, some of them are major industries that have a very strong, long-standing footprint as members of the business community, and they're strongly considering coming in. What I'd like to do it is basically in minimum of $50 million increments. So at $400 million, we can build only the most modest stadium. If we have another $400 million of total investment, we will build something quite special, which will draw extra revenue and attention. And that's at least my goal. Beyond that, we'll see. The reason it's interesting that you asked this question right after we talked about gambling is because that is the one way to immediately guarantee you could build an $800 million stadium, and it would be an attraction. Again, some people will hesitate. All I can tell you is it's on the rail, and people would have to go there to possibly lose their money, maybe make some money, but a lot of people find entertainment in that. It's funny, I have a kind of a kitchen cabinet of leaders, and all of them said they were a little reluctant to go the way of the casino. And then I asked them all, but would you go to a casino if we built it? And every single one of them said, yes, I can't wait. So it's an interesting part of society, and we just have to decide who we are. I see a lot of local families going to Las Vegas, and I would love for them to stay here when they can. That's another consideration. Give me a couple years to do this whole thing, and we'll get it done.
Okay, I'm seeing that door kind of creak open. I want to bring in the comments. I know we want to get to a new member of the Green family to tease that before we let you go for the hour today. But before that, I do want to acknowledge all the folks who are writing in, and thank you for that. I feel like we're flashing back to COVID because I'm seeing the exact arguments here. Anthony saying Josh Green is bought and paid for by Big Pharma. On the other hand, Marilyn saying, thank you, Governor Green, for being so proactive and caring for people from our state and taking the lead where needed. Glad you're our governor. So we're seeing the anti-vaxxers and the pro-vaxxers arguing right here where we left off.
Let's go with the latter. Okay, comment. Look, bought and paid for by nobody ever. I know that there were people saying that kind of nonsense during the campaign. I've never in my life worked for the pharmaceutical industry or those companies. I never did anything with them at all. I ran little health clinics and ERs, so that's nonsense. But if they mean metaphorically, am I committed to that industry only to the extent that they can produce vaccines that would help people? And if that guy doesn't want to get vaccinated, it's his choice. But if he catches measles, he will spread it to his neighbors possibly. And I don't think that's what he wants to do. I don't think people want to spread disease to people that they love or people in their community. So that guy is missing the point. The point is prevention. Prevention saves lives. And I am amenable to every discussion and every consideration. Also, there was a misconstrued position. I have not been a mandate person. That wasn't my personal policy. I try to convince people with the science, and I believe heavily in vaccinations, but I'm not at heart a mandate person. I want people, as you saw from the rules we did today, if they take the choice, if they take the opportunity to get vaccinated, we won't even affect their religious exemption. It's a matter of choice, but the choice is for you and for the people around you. That person is probably a part of an algorithm, honestly. I'm not even sure they're a human being because I see those comments and they're not rooted in reality. For decades and decades and decades, hundreds of millions of people have gotten vaccinated, and that's what kept us from having measles, kept us from having polio, kept us from having meningitis. So bought and paid for I'm not, but I am committed to vaccinations.
Well, we are almost out of time, but we know that there is a new member of the Green family that will be making its way to Washington Place and your residence, a family dog. We've had you on the show for years, and this has been a debate within the Green household. I don't know that we'll be able to get a tight shot of that, but what can you tell us about the new pup?
So my aunt and uncle bought the kids a puppy. If you could see, this is a beautiful picture of Maya and Boba. It is a Boba, yeah, Bernie Doodle, and she, who is 5 pounds, will arrive on Saturday at our house. She's lovely. Jamie was worried I had too much stress, so a dog in our life will be good. But it's for our kids from Uncle Rick and Aunt Carmen, and it's just quite wonderful to have a new baby around.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you made a pledge early on, said that you will walk the dog. Will you be responsible for walking the dog? It's a lot, as a dog owner myself. There's a lot of walking involved.
I love dogs, and after our dog gets her vaccinations, which is happening tonight for one, and then later in a couple weeks, we'll be out publicly quite a lot. But yeah, I'm going to walk this dog a ton because I benefit, and she will benefit, and there's got to be a little humor in this whole thing, right? Yeah. I understand some people get upset and the world's all crazy, but I'm happy for my kids. They're getting a dog finally, and I'm happy that people are having these dialogues, and I want people to understand we respect their opinions and differences, but be thoughtful about how things all affect one another. And that's what we're seeing. Wildfire affected us all. We're settling this out. The outbreaks of things like the measles will affect us all. The economy, when the president makes his decisions, can affect us all. So we are in this together, and that's how we're trying to govern. This dog is basically going to provide a lot of comfort to the Green household. So we're happy to introduce our dog to yours over time.
All right. Well, we expect you to bring the dog on the show the next time you're here. Thank you so much for being here today. Governor, stay with us. We'll be right back.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live. We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suchi. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, always a hearty conversation that we have with Governor Josh Green, beginning our conversation, of course, with the breaking news of that first measles case reported here in the state of Hawaii in years. The governor continuing on in his push for vaccinations and for the community to just be resilient during this time.
Yeah, warning about contact tracing, making sure that people know. Go to the Department of Health's website if you have any concerns or think you may have been exposed, something that we all need to be paying attention to. That's the reporting hotline right there, so make sure that you do call if you think you're at all at risk. We're going to see you next week with another episode of Spotlight Now. We will be focusing on the landfill and the city's plan on what to do next. Always good to see the governor, and glad for him, he's finally getting his dog.
We'll see you next week.